Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Nefology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance, and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nefos Group and Miner. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now on to the next episode. Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Nefos Group podcast. I'm delighted to have David King with me today from HCR, Harrison Clarke Rickerby. How are you, David?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Really good. Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on a Monday. Coming into London on a Monday is always fun.
It is. Yeah, nice early train.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, David, why don't you tell our viewers and listeners who aren't maybe familiar with you and HCR a little bit about who you are and what you guys do?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, look, starting with HR as a firm, we're a top 60 UK law firm now. We've got 10 offices situated across the country, so ranging from London, furthest west in Cardiff, and furthest north at the moment is Birmingham / Central England in Northampton. Full service law firm, and sort of, as part of my role there, I'm one of the partners in the private client team. So I specialise in wills, powers of attorney, estate planning, that sort of work. Head the team in Cardiff, but I also deputise as head of the team nationally. I suppose one of the reasons why I'm here talking to you today is that I've also sort of taken a keen interest in the digital assets side of that sort of estate planning work. So looking at some of those trends that are becoming more prevalent in the advice that we're providing on a daily basis to clients around their sort of digital footprint.
Yeah, amazing. And when did you then first become aware of, I guess, the digital asset crypto world, and then also when did you start taking it maybe a bit more seriously? Because I know that for me, when I became aware of it and when I took it seriously were two different points.
Yeah, I think I kind of wish I'd probably taken
likewise,
more awareness of it when I...
I wish I'd taken it more seriously when I first became aware.
Exactly,
definitely.
Yeah. So, I think we'd be having a different conversation.
Yeah.
But, No, look, I think for me, probably, born in the 80s, kind of my life has revolved around MSN and Facebook and, kind of grown up through that generation. But then, when you kind of get to where I've got to in my career and the kind of clients that we're dealing with day in, day out, very much that they've got disposable assets. Mm-hmm. So I think, that's kind of led to, I suppose, a greater focus on looking at where those assets are held and I suppose the percentage of them that actually have a digital footprint, whether that be online gambling accounts right through to cryptocurrency holdings, NFTs, etc. It has become a lot more prevalent in our day-to-day advice. I think if you're anything like me, when we were out banging the saucepans on a Thursday night, the whole conversation during that whole COVID period, I hate to mention the C word, but it was all around how's Bitcoin doing, etc. And it was really interesting to see actually how many people have a holding of some degree, whether it's large or small, etc.
Yeah, I think, and what's interesting about it as well is I think 2020, 2021 was definitely when it started to really become much more mainstream than it ever was before. So I know for me, that's when I knew about it before that, but that's when I really took a much bigger interest in it. And I think actually, in a way, a lot of the negative stories that happened after that with things like Luna and FTX and stuff has also helped the conversation in terms of bringing it to market, if you know what I mean. Because whilst there's negatives, it's being talked about, right? And sometimes they say no PRs, any PR is better than no PR type thing, right? And whilst I don't necessarily agree with that, I can see the point that getting it out there, and it definitely the conversations I have now with people, more and more people definitely know about crypto anyway. So I'm imagining, therefore, more and more people, client-wise, are talking to you about it.
No, definitely. And I think, the space where I sit is very much, when clients come to see me, I'm interested in understanding about them and what they own. So fundamentally, that forms a huge part of the advice that I then give on the back of that to say, well, okay, have you thought about X, Y, or Z, or looking at things like inheritance tax issues or just general kind of planning points, really. So, just to give you an idea. In fact, I was talking to the head of our technology team, Nicola McNeely, the other day, and we were having a conversation around wills, and I asked her the question: look, if you passed away tomorrow, would your loved ones kind of understand exactly where everything is? And I think I'm not talking out of turn. Her answer to that question was probably not.
Yeah.
And I think that answer probably rings true for 99% of people that hold this type of an asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And my wife, although she's got a lot more knowledge now because she does a lot of work on our social media and things like that, so she has got to understand it a lot more through that. Again, if it was a case of I'm no longer here and you've now got to pick up the pieces, it's that kind of solving the puzzle type thing.
Yep.
I think she'd find that part very difficult. And that's even someone that's listened to me rabbit on about it for a few years. So I totally agree. So I guess it's a funny one because we talk about, if you stash cash under a mattress, for example, it's very hard for anyone to know that it's there, right? Because it's stashed away with no digital footprint, nothing. But actually with crypto, blockchain, digital assets, there is this digital footprint. There is this marker somewhere. So how do you guys even begin that conversation with people around what they need to do to make sure that marker is known by others?
Yeah, so look, fundamentally, the advice we're providing to people is often around what their footprint looks like, both digital and non-digital. So we capture that information from people. And look, the information that we capture is only as good as the day we capture it.
Yep.
And things can change. But fundamentally, what we do is we just take as much information from people as we can. Now, what we're not taking, just to be clear, are private keys and passwords and everything else, because fundamentally that opens up the clients to no end of risk.
Do you get that question? Do you get people saying,
we do? Yeah, can you hold my private key? And the short answer is no, we can't. For one, insurance. We just can't do that. However, what we can do is we can provide people with that snapshot to say, well, look, 3 years ago when this person was sitting in front of us and they told us that their assets were ABC, and therefore, at least we've got a starting point to kind of go to. And even if, for example, the assets aren't held there, we will understand or be able to contact the relevant provider to say, well, look, okay, they previously held assets here. Where did they go?
Where did the movement go?
Yeah, and it's that tracing element that we can often. Having the information is better than not having the information. And
do you find people are open to, because crypto and blockchain is very much around privacy. There's a lot of people that are in this space of crypto that don't want people to know what they've got, or they don't want to talk about it or whatever. Do you find people are, because and I'll come back to it, because for us, people ask me that question around, I'm like, well, if they come to us, then they typically are open, otherwise they wouldn't have come to us in the first place. So how do you find that balance between people that are open to it, or do you also have people where you're, like, obviously people come to you, but you'll have also people where you actively ask them? How do you find people react to that? Yeah, good question. I think because of the nature of the work that we're providing, we need full transparency with our clients to kind of understand, well, look, give us the worst case scenario. And what I mean by that is tell us about everything, because then we can plan accordingly. Whereas if people are hiding information from us, any advice we give is it's potentially bad advice, because we've not got the full picture. So I think we'd always advocate to people, give us as much information as possible, and we can help you plan. I think it's interesting you touch on there that anonymity element to the to the investments. Again, we see that, and things like use of trusts, for example, is often an area whereby it can provide that layer of anonymity for people. And again, we've seen people put digital assets into trust, for example. So there's lots of different ways in which we can help people structure it to retain that level of privacy that they're looking for. That people want, And in terms of as a firm, how difficult was it as a firm to come to that decision? I know, for example, with our firm, ultimately it is, I am the founder, I am the one that ultimately can make the decision. So, but even in my firm where it is me that makes the ultimate decision, there were skeptical people within the firm saying, not sure this is an area I should be going into, etc. How well received was it by the firm?
I think the firm is very entrepreneurial in a good way. Not in a risk-taking element, but in the terms of, I think what they've done is they've appreciated that we're now in a world where this type of asset, digital asset in whatever form it takes, or digital footprint in whatever form it takes, is something that is more prevalent in society. You've only got to look at TikTok or Instagram, etc., and the volume of content that's being put out there, but also the commerciality of that as well. So some people online with X number of followers, and the commercial contracts that come with that, the sponsorship arrangements that come with that. These are all huge areas of development and growth for the firm. And that's why we're building the technology sector on the back of that. Not just with private client, but with commercial, corporate, property advice, etc. It all feeds into the product that we're able to offer as a firm.
Yeah, and it is really interesting because there's not very often that I talk to a law firm, and I'm sure it's the same when you maybe talk to accounting firms, but where actually the firm has not just got one rogue, crypto blockchain fanatic, but actually the firm itself. When we first kind of started talking to HCR more seriously about things, it was a case of we spoke to one person who then told us to speak to kind of 4 or 5 different others around different sectors of the business, because it does seem very much that the whole business is taking the approach rather than just one sector of it.
Oh, very much so. It ranges from people that are tracing assets, where digital assets have been misappropriated. They've gone elsewhere or somewhere where they shouldn't. We've got a team that can help in getting them back. We've got matrimonial specialists that are finding the crypto asset piece is a lot more prevalent now in divorce cases, financial separation matters, and that kind of leads in neatly with, I suppose, the tracing element. So we're very often seeing husbands, wives coming to us to say, well, look, I think my husband may or wife may have held assets in X, Y, Z places. Can you help me? And that's where we can pull in relevant tracing specialists to look at that. Yeah,
and that's something we have done a lot more from that expert witness piece, I guess, in terms of being able to support that tracing piece, because like you say, people are and I think sometimes it's not even deliberate, but people have got assets that nobody else knows about, and it isn't always deliberate. It is sometimes just that they haven't told someone, or the private key is hidden away somewhere because you've got to hide it somewhere that it's that nobody can get access to it, and then you forget to tell anybody about it, whatever. So we get that quite a lot, where actually there are innocent cases of people not telling, but there's also quite a more prevalent place where I think people think they can hide funds, and not just in criminal ways, but also in marital situations as well.
Are you, from an accountancy perspective, seeing it's more and more prevalent in annual returns for clients that they're declaring these assets?
I mean, look, from our perspective as a specialist firm in the area, so we do have and I say this to people, we do therefore have a kind of blinkered approach to it. Absolutely, we're seeing a lot of we've done a significant in nearly 1,000 now returns for people. As a small firm, that's a lot. So we're seeing a huge uptake. We're as a firm, we get 5 to 10 inquiries a week, just cold inquiries on our website that need tax returns doing. We would never have got that in the traditional kind of world. So so for us, it's absolutely more prevalent. And I've done a couple of speaking engagements on podcasts and things like that around the marital piece as well, where where by being able to search the blockchain, or the fact that we've already done it for their tax return, we're able to help provide information in things like that. I don't know whether you work on the dispute side or anything like that, but are you seeing an increase in marital cases of it being used to hide any assets, or?
I think it probably comes with a connotation that the asset type, because of the privacy element to it, comes with that sort of stigma attached to it. I can't really comment on that just purely because it's not my direct area. But I think one thing I would say is, from a disputes perspective, particularly if we look at things like Inheritance Act disputes, it's only going one way. It's all on the rise, and whatever you kind of put that down to.
And by disputes, you mean disputes by HMRC?
So this is kind of I suppose claims by beneficiaries on death.
Okay.
So effectively looking at from a how can I get more value out of something element, and I think probably put that down to increased cost of living, just the whole financial pressure that people find themselves under. But from a HMRC investigation perspective, yes, I think we're seeing more and more instances, not so much around the digital assets side of things specifically, but a lot more investigations being undertaken by HMRC in areas where probably 5-10 years ago it would have just, I suppose, gone through the system.
Yeah, and we are seeing it on both sides. We are seeing much more spot checks in inverted commas, on crypto clients, clients that hold crypto, or we've declared crypto for them, which for us obviously isn't a problem because we do such a detailed reconciliation piece. It's not an issue, but I know a lot of accountants that kind of say to somebody, sign up to this software, do your own reconciliation, give us the piece of paper, and we'll plug the numbers into our tax return software, which is fine if you're dealing in shares and you've got an official kind of tax statement from Hargreaves Lansdown or whoever it may be, and you can kind of, that document is good enough, and if it's wrong, it's on Hargreaves Lansdown as such rather than the individual. But in crypto, we don't have that, so we're definitely getting a lot more people coming to us now that are saying, look, I don't trust myself to reconcile this properly. I need I need you to help me do it. So our reconciliation piece is going up, and we're finding then, like I say, that those investigations are much easier for us to work with.
Yep.
Because actually we've done the majority of the detailed reconciliation beforehand. So yeah, we're absolutely seeing it. I must admit that we don't speak to many people that want to look at inheritance planning with their digital assets. So I don't know if that's just a generational thing, in that our firm is a very young firm, and therefore we attract the younger generation, I think, and the more startup generation. But are you seeing an uptake in people wanting to not necessarily declare, but actually explicitly in wills talk about digital assets explicitly?
Yeah, so I think that, and there's probably two strands to that. Yeah. One, they're becoming more prevalent, so people are aware that their digital assets actually have a value, and form part of the estate. But secondly, I suppose traditionally the role of executor may have fallen to a spouse or parent, typically. On occasion siblings, and for people of a certain age, that means that there are people of a certain age being appointed in that capacity. And I think very often, and this is without doing a disservice to the older generations, but they may not understand or have the requisite knowledge base to actively deal with these assets, and that's no fault of theirs. That's just because it's not something they've grown up with, and so I think we are seeing instances whereby people are rethinking the appointment of executors, attorneys in powers of attorney, for example, who are sort of better placed perhaps to understand how to deal with those assets, and that's a big gap that we can fill. So from our perspective, because of the nature of the team that we've got internally within the firm, being appointed as a professional executor or professional attorney for people in this situation, it gives us a great opportunity to provide that service to people, understanding the market, understanding how to deal with these assets. It's a huge benefit to have us involved in that process potentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that makes total sense. Is like you say, any old law firm in inverted commas can be that power of attorney or can support on that executive piece. But actually, if you've got one that really understands the fundamentals of technology and the different technologies that are out there and all those things, you've got a much better chance of everything being uncovered properly. And
exactly. Yeah, it's interesting to hear what you say about, so I suppose, the younger generation not looking at that estate planning piece, though. I think the focus doesn't necessarily have to be on inheritance tax at that age, because look, we're all going to live forever, right?
Yeah, so exactly.
I think for me it's all about the structure. So making sure that your young esports gamers or your people that are putting the content out there from a digital perspective, what liabilities come with that? How's your revenue stream being received? Is it coming into you personally? Is it coming into management company? What kind of structure have you got in place there? And that's where we can pull in our corporate commercial teams to look at the sponsorship agreements that you may have in place, to look at the setup of your business in whatever form that takes, from sole trader through to limited company, partnership, whatever, to make sure that everything's in conjunction with yourselves, obviously from an accountancy tax perspective, to make sure that everything's set up correctly. I'd strongly advocate to everybody that is something that you should do from startup right through to established business, because looking outside of the world of digital assets, the number of companies and entities that we come across whereby that structure is outdated or hasn't been looked at for significant periods of time. There's lots of benefit that we can add in that scenario as well, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you say, that we're right to also touch on the non-crypto piece as well, because there's a big not question mark, it's not the right word, but there's a huge situation where I think a lot of people, for example, don't have wills.
Yep.
You know, and that sort of situation just adds a complication, right, to the executor piece, because there's got to be, you know, a friend of mine, hopefully they won't mind me talking about, obviously I won't mention who they are, but hopefully if they hear it, they won't mind me talking about it, but they're a member of a very close member of their family died, and didn't have a will, but on the kind of the hospital bed as he was going in for this, what unfortunately became a life-threatening or fatal kind of operation, he gave some kind of last wishes and whatnot. And the issue with that is, obviously, the son did his absolute best to giving away the close family member, but did his absolute best to fulfill those wishes. But it made it a much more difficult conversation, because it was last wishes given to one person with a witness there.
Yep.
But it wasn't, you know, as formal as here's a will, you know, lawyer has it, you know, and that causes problems, right? So do you think that, you know, I mentioned about young people in estate planning and things, but are you finding that a lot of people don't have wills? Are you finding that the generational change in that, or, you know, was it a thing for the older generation? It's less of a thing for the younger generation. How do you?
No, it's funny, because I as part of my role within the firm, I head up the firm's Wills at Work benefit.
Okay.
Now, you know, without sort of straying too far, and there's a point to this.
Yeah.
So effectively, Wills at Work is an employee benefit scheme that we run to offer will writing through a company's benefits portal to their employees.
Oh, great. Yeah,
and
that's cool.
it's amazing how many times that I'm presenting to the employees of companies, and they go, well, I'm too young to have a will.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, if you've got a crystal ball and you know when that day's going to come, then, you know,
Fantastic.
brilliant. Yeah, you're going to be a wealthier person than me. But, you know, I think fundamentally, for me, wills are right for people at all ages and at all stages in their life, because of the fact in the UK we've got complete testamentary freedom. So, you know, in theory, you can leave your estate to whoever you like. Now, there's a number of effectively thoughts that you have to have as part of that process in terms of where things are going to go. So, you know, are you maintaining anybody, for example, children, spouses, you know, all of that, all of those different elements kind of feed into ultimately what the will's going to look like. But I think, you know, wills are right for everybody, and the statistic is around about, you know, 40% of people have wills in the UK.
Wow.
Now, I think that statistic for me is still too low.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, whilst you know, if you pass away without a will, the rules of intestacy will dictate where things go, and ultimately, you know, you touched on your friend's scenario there. You know, fundamentally, if you're going to change the intestacy position, the beneficiaries have to agree to that change.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you've made the will, it's you as the person that is ultimately passing away that is stating
making that decision
where everything's going to go, and you know, you're leaving things up to chance.
Yeah, and that's where, like I say, in that particular scenario, that's absolutely where it was, that it was you know, a conversation and then a delivery of that conversation by one person to a group of other people who may or may not have agreed with the wishes, and then all of a sudden it becomes an argument that maybe doesn't need to be had. You know, in an already horrible and difficult time for everybody, an emotional time for everybody
Emotions
involved.
are raw at that point anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, so having that conversation is challenging. So and I'm interested by as well that stat, you know, effectively 40% of people having wills. So what, and I know we're slightly off topic from the kind of normal crypto conversation, but I think this is important for some of our clients, some of our kind of younger listeners that, like you said, maybe sitting there thinking, I don't need one. You know, what would be your message to that sort of people? You know, would they say, I don't want to spend money on it, or, you know, what would be your message?
Yeah, look, I use the term, whilst I'll say it, I don't like it. No will, no say.
Okay.
You know, fundamentally, if you haven't made a will, then there is a risk that the assets that you leave behind on death won't go to the people that you want them to go to.
Yeah.
The making of a will isn't a vastly costly exercise when you actually take into account the benefit that it's going to give you and the value of assets that it's potentially dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, in addition to the assets that would typically pass in line with your estate, so money in your bank account, property, whatever, you know, there's also considerations around things like your pension benefits that, you know, if you're employed, there's statutory rights at the moment with regards to employers having pensions in place. So, you know, there will be potentially pension benefits that will need to pass. There will be potential death in service benefits, life insurance benefits, etc. Now, whilst typically they won't be dealt with in accordance with the terms of the will, there will be sort of beneficiary nominations that you need to make on those policies. The conversation that we can have with you is around, well, look, you've said that you want your property to go to husband, okay? why doesn't your death in service benefit follow that, for example? Because it's something that you put in place 15 years ago, and have never bothered to update the beneficiary nominations. And it's, looking at the liability that might flow with a mortgage on that property to go, well, in actual fact, how's that going to get paid off?
Mm-hmm.
And it's all of those different strings that we can pull together as part of the process. So, look, fundamentally, the product that you get at the end of the day in terms of the will may be relatively simple, but it's the conversations that we've been able to have in the round with you to kind of go, are all your ducks in a row? And that's where we add the value.
And where do you think lawyers and will writers sit in that? Because obviously I could go online and probably get an online real will writing service done for probably next to nothing these days.
Yeah, look, you can go to WH Smith's and pick a will writing pack up and do it yourself. The analogy I use is, fundamentally, I wouldn't touch the engine of my car.
Yeah.
Because look, whilst I know probably where the battery is and where the spark plugs go, I don't know enough about it to make sure I'm taking the bits out and putting them back in again in the right place.
Yep.
And that's the benefit that we can provide in the sense of years of experience, asking the right questions, testing you on the information you give us. So, whilst we will sit there and we'll ask clients questions and the information we get back from them, we don't just take as read. We will prompt them to delve a bit deeper into the reasons as to why you're doing certain things. And fundamentally, the reasons why we do that is not because we're being nosy. One of the reasons I enjoy the job is because no day's the same. And
sure.
There's lots of interesting scenarios we come across. Some of which I can't talk about.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's testing people on the information they give us to say, well, in actual fact, is that really what you want? Have you thought about these different options? So, one of the big things we come across now is the blended family scenario.
Okay.
So, husband and wife, kids from previous relationships.
Right. Yeah.
What do they do in that scenario?
Yeah. How that's split there.
Yeah. Gone are the days of 2.4 children.
No, for sure. Yeah. It's nothing simple these days, is it?
Yeah.
And you don't know what you don't know is another thing I say. The phrase you can't ask a question for something you don't know what to ask.
Exactly.
And where do you sit then on kind of like a digital will, as it were, and let's call it a blockchain will, where a will becomes an NFT? Has that ever been a consideration or a conversation that type of thing?
Yeah. So look, I mean, I think fundamentally wills are still archaic, if that's the right term to use, I suppose, in relation to them, in the sense that they still have to be in writing, they still have to be signed.
Okay.
Look back 3 years, we had a lot of fun and games with gazebos in car parks, signing wills through windows, car windows, etc. Just kind of getting all this done when people didn't want to be together in the same room. So there was legislation introduced at the time to allow remote will witnessing.
Okay.
But I think fundamentally for me, a will is such an important document that it needs that togetherness, in the sense that how can I actually tell if someone at the end of a video screen hasn't got someone stood the other side of the camera,
with a gun,
pointing a gun at them, going, sign that document or else, kind of thing. And fundamentally, there's no way of us knowing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So a will physically has to be wet ink signed.
Yep.
Can't be digitally signed or.
No. So whilst it can be digitally stored,
in
the sense that we can share copies with people, etc., there will always be an original. So there'll be a hard copy, wet signature copy, which we'd store for a client.
Yeah, wow, okay. But I guess that, like you say, that doesn't necessarily take away the opportunity to, once it's been signed, to kind of put a stamp, if you like, on the blockchain to say there's an active will in place. I was talking to an insurance provider on this podcast. I'm not sure if it will go out before or after, but we were talking about a lot of people will take out an insurance policy.
Yep.
And I say a lot of people, that's probably unfair, but people will take out an insurance policy, and then a month they'll get the certificates and all that. A month later they'll cancel the policy, and then someone says, "Show me your insurance certificate," and they'll say, "Here's my insurance certificate." You've got absolutely no idea whether that's live or not.
Yep.
And whilst you probably could check, most people won't. I know I wouldn't. I probably would now he's told me about it, but before he said it, I wouldn't have even thought that actually you could give somebody a certificate that doesn't exist. So what he was saying was, can they build a digital, effectively, blockchain-based insurance certificate that kind of has a, let's call it a green and red, kind of flag on it that says, look, if the green light's on, this insurance policy is active.
It's live, yeah.
If the red light's on, it's been cancelled. And I guess you could, again, to get away from any issue whatsoever around forgery or coercive, nature or anything like that, you could say, well, look, let's timestamp a will on the blockchain, and there's no question that when that will was signed and when that will was active, because it was, and also changes. I don't know. Do you keep a log of the date of things being changed?
Yeah. So typically, serial will makers, people make change. Well, put it this way: we prompt clients to review their will every 3 years.
Yeah.
And the fundamental reason for that is that circumstances change.
Yep.
You could sign a will today that may be out of date tomorrow if circumstances have changed.
Yep.
So you come into inheritance, someone's died, etc., etc. So there is a need for us to show that backdated record for people on occasion. So if a will is challenged, for example, we can look back over time to say, well, in actual fact, the person may have died in 2023, but they've made 10 wills between during a 30-year period, fundamentally none of which have ever changed in terms of the beneficial position hugely.
Yeah.
So therefore, if someone were to challenge the will, we can look back over that 30-year period, look at the different wills, and say, no, in actual fact, what they wanted was
so
a
kind
true
of like
reflection of their wishes.
A version history, as it
exactly.
were, of
yeah.
how it changed.
So having all of those records is really important.
And do you think the blockchain then could support that and benefit that, or do you think it's an unnecessary step?
I think it's right for some people.
Yeah.
I think the technological aspect of it will still scare some people.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think certainly storing documents in that way, I can see huge benefits in it. Just having that snapshot for people to kind of look at their own record. It'd be helpful for me just to kind of go, right, okay, I've got insurance policies with X, Y, and Z. My will's here. My power of attorney is here.
I mean, I know it'd be helpful for me if I could easily see on the blockchain when policies need to be renewed, and you've got kind of one place for. We've been talking to the guys at Origin.
Yep.
They've been talking to you guys at HCR a lot, I know. And some of the stuff that they're doing in terms of that digital footprint is really, really interesting. So I do think there's a future for it, but like you say, there probably is a bit that needs to be worked out in the middle.
But I think it's only going one way. As the people that might be more scared of it,
become less scared
falling
of it.
away, become less scared of it, and there's going to be a shift in perception on these things.
And that kind of, I guess, leads me nicely onto the last point around where do you see the future? I know we can't say too much about what HCR are necessarily going to do as a firm, as commercial sensitivities and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of what you can say for the business, but also for you personally or for the department you run, where do you see the kind of future?
Look, the firm, as I mentioned already, is very entrepreneurial. It's always forward thinking in terms of its approach. So I think that the whole technology sector is growing under Nicola McNeely's steer, and lots of other people within the firm. It's not just Nicola, but I think it's only going to go one way, and that's the volume of work that we're doing in this area is going to increase. Through a number of reasons. One is there's more people in the sector, and that comes with its own commercial challenges and everything else. But secondly, personally, there's more and more people holding digital assets. Whether that we've probably all had a bet on the Grand National at some point through your William Hill account on your phone, and it can be things as simple as that. And that for me is your digital footprint. It doesn't necessarily have to be a digital coin of some description, does it?
No, for sure.
There's lots of different ways in which these assets can materialise. So, I think watch this space. Look, as a department for ourselves, we've taken the step of adding in the digital assets questionnaire as part of our general estate questionnaire. So, for us, it's one and the same thing now. So the digital assets you own will get asked about anyway. It used to be an add-on that we'd share with people, whereas now it's all part of that standard questionnaire. And we make no apologies for the fact that has lengthened the questionnaire that we'll send people, but I think equally it shows the importance of us capturing that information.
Oh, for sure, and they can ignore that piece if they haven't got anything.
If it's not relevant, ignore it.
And I guess to give one kind, I like to try and give a takeaway if we can. I know when I listen to things, I like to be able to take things away. If you had a kind of takeaway or a message that you would say to kind of especially the younger generation within crypto, earning good money. Obviously, we support on the tax piece and things like that. But what would be your message to those people that they may not be doing right now?
Plan for the future.
I
think it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but don't be shy about picking up the phone and having a conversation. Lots of people have got a misconception of lawyers. Some lawyers that the first thing we do is charge. That isn't what we're here for. We're here to help make sure that people's affairs are structured in the right way, whether that be personal, business, or a mix of both. And that's what as a firm we do really well. We we cross that divide between advising you personally, advising you from a business standpoint, and looking at the round. And I think what I'd advocate to people is just pick up the phone, talk to us. If it's me, fantastic, I can advise you. If the question you ask me isn't directly aimed at me, I can pull in colleagues and from across the spectrum, whether that be corporate, commercial, property, family, litigation, whatever we need, we can pull people in to help advise you.
Yeah.
And on the back of it, I think you'll find that things probably become a bit clearer in terms of I suppose if it's a business wise where you're going, the strategy, the tax perspective feeds into that a huge amount as well. But then personally as well, if it's just a case of we've had the opportunity to create that record for you, so that God forbid, worst case scenario, you do go under a bus tomorrow, we've got that picture.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a really important message for everyone, that start planning now. Basically, you know, we never know what's around the corner. We don't want to be doom and gloom and all those sorts of things. But I mean, take the topical news, although it may not be when this goes out, but the submersible.
Yeah.
As a 17-year-old or whatever how old he was.
Awful scenario.
Awful situation, but it's a situation that I say nobody would have thought of. Obviously, it was a high-risk thing to do. But my point is, you could be thinking, I'm just doing this or I'm just doing that. I don't need a will, or I don't need to plan, or, bits and pieces. But actually, the sooner you start those conversations, the better structured and better planned you can be for any, hopefully long time away, but any eventualities that come.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, thank you for joining us, David.
My pleasure.
Really
thanks for having me.
I know from our perspective at Minor and Nefos, we're going to work, much more closely with you guys at HCR in terms of how we can support our clients and whatnot. So, delighted to be able to deliver part of that message of the firm today.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David.
Cheers.
Cheers.